When Rebecca Torres's pearl white Cadillac Escalade disappeared into my drainage ditch, that HOA executive committee badge in her window was the last thing visible before the mud swallowed it whole. Did I lay a hand on her vehicle? Not once. My gravity release platform handled that. After 8 months of her trampling my property, ignoring every warning, and screaming, "Go ahead," while my security cameras rolled, she stared me down and demanded it. So I pulled the lever. But first, let me show you what came after. The morning air hit different that day. Sharp. Clean. That April cold that wakes you up before the coffee does? I stepped off my porch at dawn, mug in hand, heading to the cattle barn like I had every morning for 4 years. Didn't make it far. About 75 yards out, near the southwest corner where my land meets the tree line, something caught the light wrong. Wasn't farm equipment. Wasn't anything that belonged. What I saw made my pulse jump. Rebecca's Escalade, that pristine white status symbol she'd driven across my fields dozens of times, now sitting at a 40-degree angle in the drainage ditch. Rear bumper pointed skyward like a surrender flag. Front grille buried in mud so deep the headlights had disappeared. Her passenger mirror hung by electrical wires, swaying like a broken arm. Mud streaked the windshield in thick brown strokes. Nature erasing arrogance. And there, barely visible through the filth, was that ridiculous window cling. HOA Executive Committee, peeling at one corner, flapping weakly. Poetry. Right beside it. Her blessed and grateful bumper sticker now read "Just Cessed" and "Rate thanks to the mud coverage." I laughed. A real, deep belly laugh that echoed across my empty fields. But here's what matters. I never touched that Escalade. Never towed it. Never pushed it. Never laid a finger on it. Physics did. Or more precisely, the platform I engineered after 8 months of her destroying my crops, terrorizing my livestock, and treating my 73 acres like her personal parking lot. Standing there watching that Escalade settle deeper into clay, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Just calm. The kind that comes when consequences finally catch up to choices. And trust me, we'll get to all of it. The registered letters she burned. The warning signs she ran over. The sheriff she tried to charm. And that moment she dared me to activate my system. But right now, understand this. Rebecca Torres had no business on my farm. And today, thanks to Newton's laws and some engineering, her vehicle finally got the message. Hi there. I'm Marcus Brennan, the farmer sharing this story with you today. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is worth every minute. Before all this, before the cameras, confrontations, lawyers, the machine, I lived a completely different life. Fluorescent lights, quarterly projections, a smartphone that never stopped buzzing. For 18 years, I worked in industrial logistics planning for a freight company in Omaha. Not glamorous, but solid. The kind that keeps America moving while nobody notices. I designed routing systems, optimized warehouse flows, squeezed pennies from every supply chain mile. People said I had a gift for seeing how systems work together. Like I could sketch solutions to logistical nightmares before anyone else saw the problem. Maybe. But talent doesn't save you from burnout. Somewhere between the 20th emergency video call and the 100th weekend answering emails, instead of living, something in me quit. Not dramatically. No shouting match. Just a quiet realization one midnight in a conference room that smelled like reheated pizza. I can't do this anymore. So I stopped. Spent 14 months saving every dollar, researching properties, looking for land far from corporate culture. That's when I found it. 73 acres of rolling grassland outside Hastings. Nebraska, open pasture, clean creek through the eastern section, a weathered barn with more character than any office building I'd entered. And the best part? My property line sat completely outside Meadowbrook Heights HOA boundaries. Not partially. Not technically. Completely. Legally. Definitively outside their jurisdiction. Back then, I knew nothing about homeowner associations except the jokes. They'll fine you for parking wrong, arrest you for growing wildflowers, measure your grass with rulers. Funny stuff. Until you live next door to one. But standing in that field for the first time, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Real peace. Wind moving through switchgrass. Old barn wood creaking. Insects humming. I took a long breath and thought, this is it. This is where I start over. I renovated the farmhouse slowly. Rebuilt the barn with my own hands. Brought in a dozen head of cattle. Planted soybeans and corn on the western acres. There's something grounding about physical labor. Ending each day with sore muscles but a clear head. I traded spreadsheets for soil samples. Artificial light for sunlight. Conference calls for cattle calls. For 4 years, life became exactly what I'd hoped for. Simple. Predictable. Mine. I knew the HOA neighborhood was close. Identical rooftops. Manicured lawns, so perfect they looked spray painted. Driveways wide enough to park 3 Mercedes side by side. But I kept to my world, and they kept to theirs. A polite, invisible boundary between 2 completely different lifestyles. That's how it should have stayed. But peace has a strange way of attracting trouble. And some people can't tolerate boundaries they don't control. That's when Rebecca Torres entered my life. Rolling onto my property in her gleaming Escalade. Sunglasses big enough to shield a satellite dish. And an attitude that could strip paint from a John Deere. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon in late March. One of those unremarkable spring days when the sky stretches blue and lazy. I was near the barn replacing a rotted fence post when I heard an engine. Not a pickup truck. Not a tractor. This was different. Smooth. Expensive. The purr of German engineering and monthly payments that could feed my cattle for 3 months. I stepped out from behind the barn and spotted it. A pearl-white Cadillac Escalade creeping down my gravel access road like it owned every stone. Then it veered off the gravel entirely, rolling straight into my field. At first, I genuinely thought she was lost. Happens out here all the time with GPS sending city folks down wrong roads. So I waved. Friendly. Figuring she'd ask for directions. Nope. She kept driving. Tires carving deep ruts through soft soil. Cutting straight through my young corn plants. No hesitation. No slowing down. Just a steady glide deeper into my property until she stopped about 25 yards from my fence line. The door opened, and out stepped Rebecca Torres. I didn't know her name yet, but I recognized the type instantly. Perfect blonde highlights. Sunglasses that cost more than my monthly feed bill. Crisp white blazer that had never seen a day of real work. She circled her Escalade like she was inspecting a runway, not a working farm field. I took a calming breath and walked toward her. "Ma'am," I called out, keeping my tone neutral. "This is private property." She barely glanced my way, didn't even acknowledge I'd spoken. She clicked her key fob, locked the Escalade, and started walking toward the HOA neighborhood like she'd parked there 1,000 times before. "Ma'am?" I said again, louder this time. "You can't park here." She stopped slowly, dramatically, like I'd interrupted something important. She turned her head toward me like a hawk, spotting a field mouse. "Oh," she said, waving one manicured hand dismissively. "Relax. It's just grass." "Actually," I replied, "that's my corn." She lowered her sunglasses just enough to glance at the plants around her designer heels. Then she laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not even a nervous laugh. A laugh that communicated one message clearly. "You're beneath me. This is community overflow parking." She announced, like she was reading a weather report. "The HOA has used this access point for years. It's documented." I blinked. "No. Ma'am, this is my farm. 73 acres. Deeded, registered, and paid for." She smirked. "Oh, you're new here," she said, as if that explained everything. "You probably don't understand how things work yet." Then, and I'll never forget this, she walked around me. Not past me. Around me? Like I was a fence post. Like I wasn't worth navigating directly. She called over her shoulder. "I'll only be an hour or so. It's really not a big deal." And just like that, she was gone. I stood there in my field, staring at her, Escalade sitting crooked among my corn rows, mud already pooling around the tires. I had a dozen things I could have shouted after her. Things about property rights, common decency, maybe the legal definition of trespassing. But I didn't. Because I've learned something important living out here. The first incident tells you who a person is. The second tells you what you're dealing with. The third tells you what must be done. And Rebecca Torres, she wasn't done. Not even close. If that first Wednesday afternoon had been the end of it, maybe I could have written it off as a misunderstanding. A rude one. Sure. But still just a moment of ignorance. But people like Rebecca don't just test boundaries, they demolish them and redecorate on the other side. 3 days after our first encounter, I heard that engine again. Same smooth purr. Same entitled hum of luxury rolling where it had zero business being. I stepped outside before she even came into view. Coffee still warm in my hand. Just like before, her Escalade bounced off the gravel and nosed directly into my field. Only this time, she didn't stop near the fence line. No, she drove deeper, cutting a fresh diagonal path through the soybeans I'd spent 2 weeks planting and protecting from late frost. She parked in almost the exact same spot as before, like she was marking territory. She climbed out, didn't even glance my direction, didn't pretend to look apologetic, just grabbed her designer purse, flipped her hair over one shoulder, and marched toward the neighborhood like she was walking a fashion runway. I approached the Escalade, placed my hand on the still warm hood, and examined the tire tracks she'd carved into my land. Soybean shoots crushed and flattened. Soil compacted so hard I'd need to re-till the entire section. Every inch of it represented time and money. And for Rebecca, it was just a shortcut. That second incident told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't ignorance. This was habit. And habits, once tolerated, become perceived rights in certain people's minds. But the third incident, that's when I understood the real problem. It was early morning, frost still clinging to the grass. I was walking the fence line, checking on 2 heifers due to calve any day. That's when I heard it. Not the smooth hum this time, but a roar. fast and reckless. I turned just in time to see that white Escalade tearing into my field like she was testing 0 to 60 times. Dust flying, plants snapping under the tires, mud spraying up behind her like a rooster tail. She wasn't driving through my land. She was attacking it. And this time, she was laughing. Window down, sunglasses on, music blasting from her speakers. She even honked twice, the kind of attention-seeking honk teenagers do in parking lots. When she disappeared through the HOA gate, I just stood there, hands at my sides, heart pounding with that special mix of anger and disbelief that only comes when someone violates your home. When she returned that evening around 6 o'clock, she did it again. Same path. Same speed, same horn, same complete disregard for the land that fed my cattle, paid my bills, and gave me the peaceful life I'd worked so hard to build. And it didn't stop there. Within 2 weeks, her friends started copying her. Shiny SUVs, minivans with stick figure family decals, a sedan whose driver actually waved at me like I was their personal valet. They weren't just using my field anymore. They were treating it like HOA, common property, like a side street for their convenience. And Rebecca. She took it even further. Sometimes she'd stop her Escalade right in the middle of my field, roll down her window, and record videos on her phone like she was filming content about her busy suburban lifestyle. Sometimes she'd leave the engine idling for 20 minutes while she dug through her trunk, mud splashing her expensive shoes. But the worst came on a breezy Thursday when she brought her little designer dog, one of those dogs that shivers more than it walks, and let it run loose across my grazing area. My cattle scattered in panic. One young heifer twisted her leg badly, trying to escape that yapping furball. When I confronted Rebecca about her dog nearly causing serious injury, she rolled her eyes and said, "Maybe your cows should be less dramatic." The escalation was undeniable. It wasn't just that she didn't respect my land. It was the certainty carved into every gesture, every laugh, every dismissive wave, that she believed she had the right to do whatever she wanted here. As if my property existed purely as overflow parking for HOA events. As if leaving me with broken fences, destroyed crops, and terrified cattle was just the cost of living near her kingdom. Standing there in those ruined rows, I realized something crucial. Rebecca wasn't just entitled. She was testing me. And people like that don't stop when they're asked nicely. They stop when they hit something immovable. And I was about to become exactly that. Frustration settled into my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. Every morning, I'd step outside and see fresh tire ruts carved into my land. And that weight grew heavier. I've got patience. You don't survive farming without it. But even patience has limits. And Rebecca was sprinting toward mine at full speed. So I started simple, a sign. Clean white metal, bold red letters. No parking, private property, trespassers will be prosecuted. I posted it right where she'd been driving in, high enough to see from a distance. Reflective coating for day and night visibility. Hard to miss. I remember hammering it into the ground thinking, this should do it. Nobody can claim confusion now. Well, I underestimated Rebecca Torres. The next morning, I watched from my porch as she slowed down just long enough to read the sign. She leaned forward in her seat, sunglasses glinting in the morning light, lips pursed. Then she shrugged and drove right past it. Cut through the same path, parked in the same spot. Later that afternoon, I walked out and examined the sign. She'd driven close enough that mud had splashed across half the wording. I wiped it clean with my sleeve and stared at the fresh dent in the metal post. This wasn't ignorance anymore. This was deliberate defiance. So I escalated. I added 5 more signs along her usual route: private farm, not OA property. No vehicle access. Do not enter. Agricultural land. No parking under any circumstances. The next day, she breezed past every single one like they were yard sale decorations. That's when I knew I needed real documentation. Legal documentation. I drove into town and met with my attorney, Gerald Hoffman. Sharp guy. Thorough. The kind of lawyer who reads footnotes just to be certain. I spread everything across his desk: photos of the tire damage, time-stamped videos, property survey maps. Gerald listened carefully, tapping his pen against the folder. "Is there any kind of shared easement?" he asked. "None." I said, "I checked everything when I purchased the property." He nodded slowly. "Then she's trespassing, repeatedly and deliberately. We'll send her a formal cease and desist. That's step 1. So we did. Gerald drafted a detailed letter, professional, legal, thorough, stating my property boundaries, proof of ownership, that all access roads belonged exclusively to me, that her driving, parking, and entering my land constituted criminal trespassing, and that failure to stop would result in legal action and liability for all damages. We sent it certified mail. Rebecca signed for it. I had the receipt. For one brief, hopeful moment, I thought maybe reason would break through whatever shield protects her from reality. But the next morning, I found the letter torn to pieces and scattered across my field like confetti. I followed the paper trail with my boot until I found one fragment that still had ink visible. A torn sentence from Gerald's letter: "Continued use will result in..." Right beside it were fresh tire tracks. That afternoon, I received an email from Rebecca. Subject line: clarification regarding community access rights. The message started politely, disturbingly politely, then spiraled into complete fiction. According to Rebecca, the HOA possessed a historical buffer easement running along the western edge of my property. She even attached a map I'd never seen. One that looked suspiciously homemade. It featured a dotted line drawn in pink highlighter, a little arrow pointing onto my land, a legend reading "Community Access Corridor," and the HOA logo copy-pasted in the corner like a middle school project. I stared at it for a full minute. It wasn't a county document. Wasn't stamped, signed, or formatted like any legitimate survey. Gerald later told me it looked like something created in Microsoft Paint by someone who'd never seen an actual property survey. But Rebecca wrote, "As a member of the HOA Executive Committee, I'm informing you that our community has utilized this access point for decades. We expect you to honor shared use agreements." Decades. I'd owned the land for 4 years. And the previous owner, old Frank Simmons, swore he'd never allowed a single HOA vehicle through in 30 years of ownership. I replied with 2 sentences. "This map has no legal validity. There is no easement on my deed." Her response came in 3 words: "We'll see about that." From that moment forward, everything changed. Her trespassing wasn't casual anymore. It was purposeful. A direct challenge. A message. Rebecca wasn't just breaking rules. She was daring me to try stopping her. And, as you'll soon discover, I eventually did. It was only a matter of time. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when everything escalated to law enforcement. Not because I called first, but because Rebecca decided to weaponize the one thing entitled people always reach for when they're wrong and they know it: victimhood. I was repairing a water line near the south pasture when I heard tires skidding somewhere near the barn. Not the usual crunch of gravel, something sharper. More frantic. By the time I came around the corner, Rebecca stood beside her Escalade, arms gesturing wildly like she was directing traffic. In front of her sat a sheriff's patrol car. Sheriff Dale Morrison, good man, level-headed, seen it all, was climbing out slowly. Rebecca pointed at me the instant I appeared. There. She shrieked. That's him. That's the man who threatened me. Sheriff Morrison looked between us with that tired expression law enforcement develops when they know they've stepped into something complicated. I walked up, slowly, wiped dirt from my work gloves, and nodded respectfully. Afternoon, Sheriff. Rebecca spun toward him like an actress hitting her mark. You see? He's calm now. But you didn't hear him earlier. He screamed at me. He blocked me in. He charged at my vehicle. I feared for my safety. Sheriff Morrison raised one eyebrow just enough for me to notice. Ma'am, he said carefully, could you tell me exactly what happened? Rebecca pressed one hand dramatically over her heart, like she'd practiced the gesture. I was parking in the HOA's community access corridor, the one we've all used for years, and he came running out of that barn screaming profanities. He said he'd tow my vehicle, that he'd deal with me personally, and that I'd better hope the sheriff never found out. He intimidated me. I bit the inside of my cheek hard, because none of that happened. Not one syllable. But the thing about lies spoken with absolute confidence is they almost sound convincing. Almost. Sheriff Morrison turned to me. Marcus, did any of that occur? No, sir. I said evenly. Not one bit. But I can show you something. I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the folder labeled Trespassed documentation, and tapped the most recent video. The sheriff watched as Rebecca drove straight past my signs, directly into my field, nearly hitting an irrigation pipe. Then another video. Then photos. Timestamps. GPS coordinates. Multiple angles. Rebecca's face tightened with every image. That's edited. She sputtered. He's manipulating things. Sheriff Morrison tilted his head slightly. Ma'am, these are standard trail camera captures. Time-stamped. Sequential. Very difficult to fabricate. Rebecca's lips trembled with that special kind of indignation people feel when their lie isn't working. Well, you should be arresting him, not questioning me. She snapped. I'm a member of the HOA Executive Committee. I have rights. The sheriff closed his notebook with a soft thump, the kind of sound that announces a decision's been made. Ma'am, being on an HOA board doesn't grant you rights on someone else's private property. She gasped like he'd violated the Constitution. He turned to me, voice softer. Marcus, I've seen enough here to know this is primarily a civil matter unless we catch her refusing a direct order to leave. I can file a report, document the trespassing, but you'll need to pursue this through legal channels. I nodded. I'd expected as much. Rebecca, however, wasn't finished. She jabbed a finger toward my signs. Those are illegal, she declared. You can't just put signs wherever you want. This is HOA overflow property. Sheriff Morrison adjusted his belt. Ma'am, I reviewed the county parcel maps before arriving. This land belongs entirely to Marcus Brennan. No easement exists. You need to treat it as private property." Rebecca's voice cracked with outrage. "I will not. This is harassment. This man is dangerous." I watched the moment Sheriff Morrison's patience evaporated. He sighed, pinched the bridge of his nose, and said, "Ma'am, the only danger I'm seeing here is you driving through someone's crops at 40 miles an hour." That statement hung in the air like a bell tolling. Rebecca sputtered, her hands opening and closing, searching for words that wouldn't come. Sheriff Morrison just tipped his hat to me. "I'll file the report. Marcus, keep documenting everything. Good luck." And with that, he returned to his cruiser. Rebecca slammed her Escalade door, spun the wheels, and threw a thick spray of mud across my boots as she sped away. I watched her leave, mud dripping from my jeans, and understood something crystal clear. Sheriff or not, legal system or not, Rebecca wasn't scared. Rebecca wasn't backing down. She was just getting started. There's an old saying, "Farmers live by one," my grandfather repeated until it stuck to my soul. Land can take a beating, but animals feel it. I didn't fully understand that truth until the day everything changed permanently. It was late afternoon, sky hanging low and gray with that heavy feeling that comes before storms. I'd been tending to Bess, one of my gentlest heifers, pregnant with her first calf. She was a sweet girl, calm, trusting, would eat grain right from my palm. Cattle understand routine. They know peace, and they know disruption. That day she was grazing near the western fence, close to where the cornfield met the property line. I remember stroking her neck, feeling her steady breathing, the soft warmth of her coat under my hand. And then I heard that engine again. Louder this time. Angrier. I turned and saw the white Escalade flying across the field like it was racing toward an emergency. Music blasted from open windows. Some pulsing beat that had no place on a working farm. Rebecca's sunglasses caught the fading sunlight. She honked twice sharp. Ugly blasts that cut through the air like weapons. Bess startled so violently she stumbled sideways. My chest tightened. "Easy, girl. Easy now," I whispered, holding my hands out to steady her. But Rebecca wasn't finished. She swerved toward the grazing area, kicking up a wave of dirt and gravel that pelted Bess's hindquarters. Bess panicked. She bolted left, then right, hooves slipping in the soft ground. And then, with a sound I'll never forget, she fell hard onto her side. I dropped everything and ran. By the time I reached her, Rebecca was already gone. Nothing but settling dust marking where she'd been. Bess lay trembling, her large, gentle body heaving with terror, eyes wide, whites showing. I knelt beside her and pressed my forehead to her neck. "It's all right. Girl, you're all right. You're safe now." But she wasn't. Not really. That night I called the vet. Dr. Patterson found bruising, stress spasms, elevated heart rate, all signs of severe trauma. He warned me quietly. Stress like this, especially this close to calving, can cause serious complications. I barely slept. Stayed in the barn with her until sunrise, checking on her every few hours. Each time, she groaned softly, shifting her weight, like the pain wouldn't let her rest. The next morning, she miscarried. A stillborn calf lay in the straw small, lifeless, silent. I sat there beside her for a long time, hands steady, even though everything inside me churned like a storm. Bess nudged the calf gently, not understanding why it wouldn't move. Animals grieve. Any farmer will tell you that. And right there, something inside me crystallized. Not anger, not rage. Resolve. This wasn't about inconvenience anymore. It wasn't about tire ruts or damaged crops. This was harm to living creatures who'd done absolutely nothing wrong. And the worst part? Rebecca didn't care. She didn't even know what she'd caused, and she wouldn't have cared if she did. But the universe wasn't done yet. 2 days after Bess's miscarriage, I woke to find 4 vehicles parked in my lower field, an impromptu HOA parking lot. There was apparently a baby shower in the neighborhood. And word had spread that the farm guy doesn't mind. I stood there staring at the cars lined up in neat rows across my pasture. One had a balloon tied to the antenna. Another had a world's best grandma bumper sticker. A woman in heels, sinking into mud, waved cheerfully at me. "Thanks for letting us park here. The cul-de-sac is packed." I didn't respond. I just walked back to the barn, sat on a hay bale, and let reality sink in completely. Rebecca hadn't just crossed a line. She'd erased it. She'd spread the word, invited people, transformed my home into an unauthorized extension of her world. And I realized something crucial. No amount of talking, warning, or paperwork was going to stop her. She genuinely believed she owned my land. She believed she controlled my boundaries. She believed consequences were for other people. So if she wanted to test me, well, I was finally ready to push back. And the machine, the one that would change everything, was already forming in the back of my mind. After Bess's miscarriage, the world felt different. Not peaceful, just heavy. The kind of weight that settles in your chest after something breaks inside you. I spent that night in the barn, listening to Bess's labored breathing, watching straw shift with every tremor of her body. And, sometime around dawn, I made my decision. Talking hadn't worked. Warnings hadn't worked. The law couldn't work fast enough. Rebecca didn't respect boundaries. So I needed something she couldn't ignore. But, and this mattered more than anything, whatever I built had to be completely legal, thoroughly documented, and legally defensible. Because people like Rebecca don't fight fair. They twist your reactions into weapons against you. Before lifting a single tool, I called Gerald Hoffman, my attorney. I laid out the concept in general terms, not the colorful version, just the mechanics. A wooden platform, a tilting mechanism, a gravity-assisted slide that would gently guide trespassing vehicles off my property and into a controlled mud basin. Long pause on the phone. Then Gerald sighed heavily. "Marcus, technically speaking, if you post clear warning signs, if it's not designed to cause injury, and if gravity is doing the work rather than any mechanical launch system, it's not illegal." Another pause. "And for the love of God, don't call it a catapult." I promised I wouldn't. The design came together faster than expected. A simple tilt platform disguised as an ordinary flat wooden surface, strong enough to support an SUV. Balanced precisely to tip once a specific weight threshold was exceeded. I built the frame from reclaimed barn timber, added industrial steel hinges underneath, and installed a detent lock mechanism connected to a counterweight system cleverly hidden as stacked hay bales. I tested the mechanics with progressively heavier loads. First, a half-ton hay bale. Then, an old rusted water tank. Then, my pride and joy, my old Ford farm truck. That test. I'll never forget. I drove the truck onto the platform, killed the engine, climbed down, and walked to the release lever positioned 30 feet away. I gripped the handle, took a deep breath, and pulled. Clank. A sharp, clean metallic snap. The detent releasing? The platform shifted beneath the weight. Then, whoosh. The truck slid downward like it had been waiting for this moment its entire life. Smooth, controlled, no jerking, no violence. Just pure, beautiful physics doing exactly what physics was designed to do. When the Ford reached the end of the slide, it eased into the mud basin with a thick, satisfying squelch. I climbed down, checked the truck, not a scratch, started it right up, and drove out of the mud in four-wheel drive. The system was safer than the HOA's actual streets. I smiled so wide my face hurt. Now, I needed to ensure everything was technically legal and visually obvious. So, I went overboard with warnings. I posted industrial-grade signs around the entire boundary. Danger, active machinery, unsafe for vehicles. Automatic tilting platform. Not HOA property. Private farm equipment. Then, because documentation is king in any legal defense, I photographed every sign, recorded detailed video explaining the mechanism, filed copies with Gerald, emailed notices to the county office, even sent a generic safety advisory to the sheriff's department. But one thing was still missing. For this to work, to really work, Rebecca had to choose the platform. Not avoid it. Not hesitate. Choose it. So, I cleaned it spotless. Swept away dust. Smoothed the boards. Even laid a small gravel ramp leading to it. And then I installed the final piece of bait, a brand new sign at the center of the platform. VIP parking, authorized personnel only. Big, shiny, professional. Pure Rebecca bait. Because here's what you learn dealing with people like her. If they think something is reserved, they assume it's reserved for them. And if they think something is off limits, they believe the rule doesn't apply to them. The moment I hammered that sign into place, I stepped back and looked at my creation. A simple wooden platform, a hidden hinge mechanism, a gravity drop calibrated like a precision instrument, a mud basin waiting at the border, a system that didn't harm anyone, didn't launch anything, didn't break a single law. A system that simply said, if you choose to trespass, gravity will escort you out. And deep in my bones, I knew with absolute certainty Rebecca wouldn't be able to resist. People like her never can. For 4 days after finishing the platform, I waited. Not with impatience, not with excitement, but with the quiet, steady patience every farmer learns over decades. You plant seeds. You water them. You wait. Rebecca was no different. She was predictable, a creature of habit and ego. She would come. And when she did, the machine would be ready. On the morning of the 5th day, the sky stretched bright and clear. Wind gentle. Sun warming the barn roof the way it only does in late April. I stepped outside with my coffee and instinctively looked toward the western field. And there she was. Rebecca's Escalade. Polished so bright it looked like a pearl rolling across green fields. Turning off the HOA service road and onto my property with the confidence of someone entering their own driveway. Her engine purred across the pasture. Her wheels chewed through grass. Her sunglasses reflected sunlight like twin mirrors. And she saw the platform. I could tell from her posture, the tiny lift of her chin, the way her shoulders straightened, the spark of recognition as her eyes locked on to that shiny new sign. VIP parking, authorized personnel only. That was all it took. She didn't slow down, didn't examine the structure, didn't question why a VIP space existed on a working farm. No, she accelerated. I walked calmly into the barn, grabbed the handheld camera I'd positioned for exactly this moment, and activated the live stream backup to my cloud storage. Then I picked up the megaphone from the workbench. It still had flecks of old blue paint on the handle. I stepped into the sunlight and positioned myself about 30 yards away, close enough for her to hear clearly, far enough to stay safe. The Escalade rolled onto the platform with a satisfying thunk, her tires fitting perfectly in the shallow grooves I'd engineered into the wood. She braked. The engine idled. She was exactly where she needed to be. I lifted the megaphone. "Attention, driver of the white Escalade." My voice echoed across the field. "You are parked on active farm machinery? Remove your vehicle immediately. This is your only warning." Rebecca snapped her head toward me, eyes flashing with irritation. She leaned out her window. "Oh, please," she yelled back. "Your little scare tactics don't work on me." I raised the megaphone again. "This area is unsafe. You have 10 seconds to vacate. This is an automated tilting platform. Move your vehicle now." Rebecca revved her engine as if to mock me. Then she extended one hand out her window, middle finger pointed at the sky. I waited a beat, let the silence settle. Then I gave her one final chance. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. If you do not move your vehicle, the system will activate. Gravity will do the rest." She laughed loud, sharp, triumphant. Then she leaned further out her window and screamed, "Go ahead. Do it." That was it. The moment I'd known would come. The moment she crossed the final line. The moment she fully, publicly, voluntarily chose the consequences. I lifted my camera to capture her face perfectly in frame. Then I reached behind me and grasped the release lever disguised on the fence post the simple wooden handle that controlled everything. For one split breath, time stood completely still. Even the birds seemed to pause mid-flight. Then clank. The metal lock snapped open with a deep, cold, industrial bite. Karen barely had time to gasp. The platform dipped. The Escalade shifted, tilted, and then exactly as designed, whoosh. The entire vehicle slid backward off the platform in one smooth, unstoppable motion. Not launched. Not thrown. Just guided by gravity itself. Straight into the mud basin I'd excavated at the property line. The Escalade landed with a wet, glorious squelch. Mud exploded upward in a thick, satisfying arc across that pristine white paint, and then silence. The engine sputtered once, coughed twice, then died completely. Rebecca's sunglasses sat crooked on her face as she stared through the windshield in absolute shock, the pure, unfiltered expression of someone who just learned for the very first time that the world does not revolve around her. And me. I took a deep, steady breath, because I knew what was coming next. The shouting, the panic, the sheriff, the accusations. But I also knew something else. Every second of it had been recorded. Every sound, every warning, every sign. Rebecca hadn't just parked in the wrong spot. She'd parked herself directly into her own consequences. For several long seconds after the Escalade settled into the mud basin, Rebecca just sat there frozen behind the wheel. Mouth open, sunglasses askew, like they were embarrassed to be part of this scene. Then the screaming began. Not just shouting, a full-blown meltdown. What did you do? You tried to kill me? This is illegal. You're going to prison. Her words bounced across the field, echoing off the barn like a trapped animal. I didn't respond immediately. I simply lifted the camera with steady hands and calm breathing. Zooming in on her face, documentation. Always documentation. Rebecca struggled to push her door open against the mud suction. She had to shove twice before it finally swung wide. She climbed out, one designer shoe sinking immediately into the clay. She wobbled, waved her arms frantically, then yanked her foot free with a loud, wet SEH loop. That's when she pointed at me with a trembling finger. You. She screamed. You assaulted me. You set a trap. You could have killed me. I spoke slowly, clearly, almost as if narrating for a courtroom. Rebecca, I warned you repeatedly. You ignored every sign. You refused to move when instructed. You verbally dared me to activate the system. Everything is recorded. She shrieked back. I didn't dare you. You tricked me. I pressed the playback button on my camera. Her voice rang out loud and undeniable. Go ahead. Do it. Rebecca's face drained of color. Then she did what entitled people always do when caught. She doubled down. My husband, she screamed. The HOA. They're going to sue you. They're going to take this entire farm. This is all community property. I raised an eyebrow calmly. Rebecca, that mud basin you're standing in, that's mine too. She stepped forward angrily and immediately sank her other shoe ankle deep. The mud made an obscene sucking noise as she tried to pull free. Behind me, my barn cat watched the entire spectacle like it was the best entertainment in months. Rebecca finally wrenched herself loose and stomped toward me, mud splashing up her legs with each step. I'm calling the police, she yelled. I'm reporting you for attempted murder. I nodded calmly. I already called the sheriff. They'll be here any moment. She blinked hard. You what? I called them when you refused to move your vehicle after the 10-second warning. Rebecca froze like a deer spotting headlights. Her eyes darted around frantically, searching for something to blame. Some angle of innocence to grab onto. She found nothing. And then, right on cue, the sound of a familiar engine rumbled down my gravel drive. Sheriff Morrison's patrol car. Rebecca immediately snapped into character, shoulders hunched, hands trembling, breath shaky. Full victim mode. She ran toward him. Officer, thank God you're here. This man tried to kill me. He tried to launch my car into a ravine. Sheriff Morrison stepped out slowly, removed his sunglasses deliberately, and surveyed the scene, the tilted platform, the mud basin. Rebecca covered head to toe in filth, her Escalade sitting like a beached whale, and me standing calmly with a camera. He took a long, measured breath. Ma'am, he said evenly, where exactly do you see a ravine? Rebecca sputtered. The machine. He used some kind of catapult. I held up one finger. No, sir. Gravity-assisted platform. Completely documented. And she received 3 clear warnings. Rebecca shrieked. He's lying. He's lying about everything. I pressed play on the video. Sheriff Morrison leaned in close. Clank. The lock releasing. Whoosh. The Escalade sliding. Squelch. The landing. If the sheriff tried to hide his smile, he failed miserably. He turned his head just slightly, just enough that Rebecca couldn't see the corner of his mouth twitch upward. Then he cleared his throat and said in the driest tone I'd ever heard, "Well, ma'am, technically speaking, gravity isn't illegal." Rebecca gasped like someone had slapped her with the entire legal code. Sheriff Morrison gestured toward her Escalade. "Ma'am, you are on active farm equipment. You ignored warnings? Again, we need to discuss criminal trespassing, property damage, and your refusal to comply with lawful instructions." She made a sound somewhere between a sob and a growl. "This is an injustice. I'm the victim here." The sheriff folded his arms. "Ma'am, the only victim I'm seeing is that mud." I couldn't stop myself. A small chuckle escaped. And that's when Rebecca saw it. The truth settling on her face like slow, heavy dawn. She had finally, completely trapped herself. Sheriff Morrison stood there for a long moment, boots sinking slightly into soft earth, eyes moving between Rebecca, the tilted platform, and her half-buried Escalade. That luxury vehicle sat crooked in the mud like a beached yacht, chrome grille sagging, and that proud HOA Executive Committee window cling now hanging by one muddy corner, a symbol of authority reduced to comedy. The sheriff walked slowly around the platform, leaning down to inspect the hinge mechanism. When his knuckles rapped against the steel, the sound wasn't cartoonish. It was industrial, heavy, solid clank. He nodded, almost impressed. That's some serious engineering. "Marcus." Rebecca sucked in a breath like he'd betrayed her. "You're praising him." "That thing nearly killed me." Sheriff didn't even glance her way. He rotated the hinge with 2 fingers, letting the beam shift slightly. The machinery responded with a low, grinding sound. Metal on metal, weight shifting, a noise that didn't apologize for being real or dangerous. Rebecca took 2 steps backward. I don't feel safe here." Sheriff straightened and brushed dirt from his hands. "Well, ma'am, considering all those warning signs, you weren't supposed to feel safe here." He pointed to the industrial placards surrounding the area. Active machinery. Unsafe for vehicles? VIP parking. Authorized personnel only. She finally seemed to notice them all, and the VIP sign made her face scrunch like she'd bitten into a lemon. "That VIP sign is fake. This is entrapment." Sheriff choked on a laugh and turned away, pretending to cough. "Entrapment is something police do, ma'am. Not farmers." She spun toward me like an arrow. "He built a weapon." Sheriff thumped the hinge mechanism with his palm, CLANK. "Well, technically, what he built is gravity on hinges." Her brain visibly short-circuited. I kept recording. Documentation always. Rebecca, desperate for someone to support her, yanked her phone out with muddy fingers. Her screen was instantly smeared with brown clay, and streaked right across it was her phone wallpaper, a photo of her golden retriever wearing a party hat. Mud covered half the dog's face. Somehow that made her look even more alone. "Richard," she screamed into the phone. "Get over here right now." He attacked me. He catapulted my Escalade. On speaker, her husband's voice was painfully clear and exhausted. Rebecca, I told you to stop going over there. Her mouth fell open. What? Are you serious? You're taking his side. I'm taking the side of not losing our homeowner's insurance. And you're standing in mud again, aren't you? This is not my fault. Rebecca, please just stop. Click. The call ended. She stared at the phone screen, stared at that muddy golden retriever face like the entire universe had betrayed her. She tried again, different number. Her lawyer this time. Bradley, you need to get out here immediately. This farmer tried to murder me. Sheriff raised an eyebrow pointedly. I made sure the camera captured it. On the line. Her lawyer's voice sounded utterly exhausted. Rebecca, is this about the parking situation again? This isn't parking. This is attempted murder. Sheriff cleared his throat deliberately. If gravity's murder, ma'am, we're all guilty. Even through the phone speaker, her lawyer sounded completely done. Rebecca, I specifically told you not to speak to anyone. Not the farmer, not the sheriff, not me on the phone. Stop talking until I arrive. Click. Another hang-up. Rebecca stared at her screen again. The mud on the golden retriever photo had spread worse. Her thumb had smeared it further. Only one confused puppy eye glowed back at her through a swamp of brown sludge. Even the dog looked disappointed. Sheriff Morrison let out a slow sigh and flipped open his citation book. Ma'am, based on video evidence, posted warnings, clear property boundaries, and 8 months of documented trespassing, I'm issuing a criminal trespass citation. Rebecca staggered backward like he'd physically shoved her. You can't do this. I'm the victim, Sheriff asked me without looking up. You want to add property damage and livestock endangerment. I nodded firmly. Rebecca shrieked. You're all conspiring against me. Sheriff clicked his pen shut with finality. No, ma'am. We're just standing on the ground. And ground, far as I know, doesn't lie. She looked at him, at me, at the sunken Escalade, at the crooked window cling, at her mud-covered phone, at that half-buried golden retriever photo. And for the first time since I'd known her, Rebecca Torres had absolutely nothing left to say. The tow truck arrived mid-afternoon, engine rumbling across the quiet fields. Walt Jeffries, oldest and most no-nonsense tow operator in the county, stepped out with a slow, knowing grin. Well now, he drawled, hooking thumbs in his belt. Ain't this a sight for sore eyes? Rebecca didn't answer. She stood ankle-deep in drying mud. Arms folded tight. Mascara streaked down her cheeks in lines she didn't seem to notice. Her Escalade sat at a ridiculous angle in the basin. Wheels half submerged. Undercarriage packed with clay so thick it looked like adobe construction. That HOA executive committee window barely clung on, just one muddy corner left, swaying pathetically in the breeze, like even the adhesive had given up. Walt climbed down into the basin with a long metal hook, mud squelching around his boots. He muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. That's going to cost a small fortune to repair. Differentials full of mud. Sensors fried. Frame probably bent. Might as well call this one totaled. Rebecca made a tiny broken sound, not quite a word, not quite a cry. Somewhere between disbelief and heartbreak. Sheriff Morrison handed her the paperwork. Tone patient, but official. These are your charges: criminal trespass and property damage. Court dates listed at the bottom. You'll receive a mailed copy as well. Rebecca didn't take the paper at first. She stared at it like he was handing her a live snake. Sheriff waited patiently, then nudged it toward her again gently. Finally, she grabbed it with trembling fingers. Mud immediately smeared across the signature line. Walt began winching the Escalade free. The machinery groaned, chains rattling, mud sucking like quicksand as the vehicle slowly peeled away from the earth. The sound was awful, a long, wet tearing noise, like the land itself was reluctant to release its prize. As the SUV rose, a massive chunk of dried clay slapped onto the ground, revealing that ridiculous, blessed and grateful bumper sticker. Only now it just read "Cest" and "Rate," the rest torn away by mud. Even nature was roasting her. While Walt secured the Escalade to his flatbed, Rebecca pulled out her phone again, hands still shaking. She tapped the screen weakly. Mud smeared across that goofy golden retriever party hat photo. She winced visibly. Even her dog looked disappointed. Signal was weak out here. But finally her email loaded. She opened one message, then froze solid. Her voice cracked. No. No, 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 no. She read it aloud before realizing she was speaking. Dear Mrs. Torres, after thorough review, we cannot process your claim. Insurance covers accidents, not willful trespassing. Ignoring posted warnings. Or, she paused, rereading the next line twice. Jaw-hanging localized gravity experiments. I had to look away to keep from laughing outright. Sheriff pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered, Lord have mercy. Rebecca sagged like she'd been gut-punched. She sank down onto a semi-dry patch of ground, shoulders slumping so low she looked half her normal height. My husband, she whispered. He'll fix this. But even she didn't sound convinced. I didn't have the heart to remind her he'd already hung up on her twice that morning. Walt walked over with his clipboard. All right, Mrs. Torres. Tow to your residence is $700. Impound storage is $130 per day if you can't take it immediately. As for cleanup and repair, he paused meaningfully. With all that mud damage, the sensors, the drivetrain, whatever's cracked underneath, you're looking at 15, maybe 18,000. And that's optimistic. Rebecca stared straight ahead, glassy-eyed, like her brain had shut down for self-preservation. Sheriff nodded toward his patrol car. I can give you a ride home, ma'am. She stood mechanically, following him like someone walking through a nightmare. Before getting in, she turned back toward me one last time. Her voice was the smallest I'd ever heard it. You're going to regret this. I met her eyes steadily. I warned you. 8 months straight. Every chance in the world. She blinked hard once. Then Sheriff closed the car door with finality. They drove off down the gravel road. Walt followed with her Escalade strapped to his flatbed, and the field finally fell silent. For the first time in 8 months, I could hear the creek again. I could hear my cattle grazing peacefully on the far slope. I could hear my own breathing. Steady and calm. Peace. Real. Earned peace. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived from Meadowbrook Heights HOA. Not from Rebecca. Not from her husband. But from the new acting board president. One short paragraph. The HOA does not endorse Mrs. Torres's actions. Her conduct does not reflect our community values. We apologize for repeated trespassing and any distress caused. No signature, just a typed name. Anonymous accountability. A week after that, I learned through the grapevine that they'd stripped Rebecca of her community access privileges, suspended her from the executive committee indefinitely, and placed her under review for conduct unbecoming a board member. Word was, she stopped attending meetings entirely. Word also said Richard had moved into a downtown apartment, and word further confirmed what Walt predicted. Rebecca's Escalade had been officially declared a total loss by her insurance company. None of it surprised me. The land has a way of humbling people. Gravity, too. That evening, I sat on my porch with fresh coffee, watching the sun sink into the horizon and paint my fields gold. No headlights cutting through my property. No luxury SUV idling in my pasture. No HOA entitlement screaming across my fence lines. Just quiet. Just my land. Mine. The kind of silence you can only earn by standing your ground calmly, legally, and with help from basic physics. And as I rocked back in that old chair, I smiled to myself. Next time someone asks what happened to Rebecca's Escalade, I'll tell them the honest truth. I never touched it. Gravity did all the work. So, what do you think about my situation? Was I justified? Or did I go too far? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts.